All right, re-rolling live from the Survival Pod. This is Freedom Film. What's the topic today? I really think when I see a lot of these environmental movements that literally destroy a lot of economies, I think your vote should actually come with responsibilities for what you voted for and financial responsibility. What do I mean by that? I think a lot more people, if they had skin in the game, would think twice about how they're doing things. And I think that's the problem with the American voting system. What am I talking about? Well, let's talk about some Delta smelt and the logging situation where I grew up. Yeah, this is Freedom Phil. Like, subscribe. Let's get into it. And hey, turn up the video speed. And why do I say that? Because you can watch this in 1.75 if I choose to upload it. And as always, not a channel for children. If you're somebody's kid and you're just watching my channel and you regurgitate something I say and your parents get pissed, understand you have shitty parents. Your parents should know what you're watching. I am not your digital nanny. Stop farming out your parental responsibilities to a screen. And for anybody that knows my chat's basically full of usually a bunch of retards and robots. So if I call you a retard or robots because you're acting that way, and frankly, I have no problem with the banhammer because a lot of you are fucking idiots. I got maybe 5% of the populace that watches my channel are thinking individuals. The rest of you, yeah, you literally could burn the fires and I wouldn't care. People are like, why don't you treat your chat better? Why isn't my chat more intelligent? Because they choose not to be. They choose to be fucking idiots. So I don't care about idiots. All right, let's get into it. I'm watching this thing and they're talking about the Delta smelt issue, and they're showing how this fish, literally, that's basically went functionally extinct, is the reason they dump, what is 1 million households or more worth of water just to get pissed out into the ocean. So the water crisis is purely manufactured in California. There's ways that could improve things, even with the farming and whatnot. But you ask yourself, who really benefits from the voting that says save the smelt? Like, so a handful of people, and they call it a keystone species, which means this small fish gets eaten by a bigger fish, and eventually these feed salmon and so forth and so on. And the problem is with this outlook is that, sure, you might be right about that part right there, but you haven't addressed the invasive species that are in the area, maybe a little farm runoff waste and whatnot, even though it's California, and they're probably doing a pretty good job on trying to, crack down on chemicals in the water. But you're basically using this fish as a reason to destroy God knows how many farms, God knows how many people. And you ask yourself, for all these Democrat, well-intentioned voters, useful idiots generally, who really benefits from your decisions? And it's much similar to what happened up in the Northwest. Usually it's megacorps. Just like with the trucking, just like with the business, just like with anything, the megacorps are the benefactors of your dumbass voting. And why? Because you're not held accountable. I personally think voting should have accountability. Like if you're, pro-life, maybe you should have to adopt some kids. I'm just saying, a wild thought there. If you're pro-war, maybe you should have to sign up before you send somebody else's kid. Wild thought there, right? Like if you see all these old timers talk about, we need to bomb this country. Like how many years have Republicans talking about bombing Iran? And it looks like it might finally happen. Maybe we should send your ass over first, right? Nice thought there. Accountability for your decisions, for your voting. In the same way that when you see these jackasses out there who basically run around there and they're like, well, we need to save this fish. And by the way, they did this crap up in Washington, where I grew up out in the Western Washington, Western Oregon. We once had a thriving industry of timber, and there's more than enough timber out there. The thing of it is that one day in the late 80s, this decision written down in papers, basically the judge said, you can't cut all this timber. Now you got to understand the history before that. There are a lot of these companies that these small mom and pop companies went to the government and said, okay, are we going to have timber to cut in the next number of years? Because it's kind of a contentious issue. And they said, yeah, there's more than enough timber in the federal lands and whatnot. We'll just manage it. It'll be, between this and the DNR, there's more than enough. And so they taking their word for it, a lot of these people build, mills and all sorts of businesses, and they were putting their life on the line with that. Kind of like similar to what happened to the steel industry and the coal industry in America. People believed that things would be fine because they were told they were going to be fine. And then one day, because of an administration change, a judge or somebody with a pen completely destroyed the industry that most of the people I grew up with relied on. And all for what? A bird, the spotted owl. By the way, it turned out the spotted owl was actually being outcompeted by a bigger owl that showed up, I think, from Eastern Washington or something, like a barred owl or screech owl. Point of it is that an invasive species done butt-fucked that owl. And so in response, what's our answer? Well, it's just shut down the entire forest instead of managing it, which then caused basically the entire industry to go into a collapse. Which there were drug problems before, but they got way worse after that for a lot of places. There were domestic violence issues, a lot more after that. There were a lot of fucking issues that happened simply because a bunch of people, generally in Seattle or some other part of the state, voted for shit that literally didn't affect them. They voted for this. And now I say, if you're going to vote for something, you should be held responsible for your vote. There should be some financial accountability or maybe even prison time if you really fuck up. But that's not the way our voting works. Our voting is generally this nonsense of, well, you see, we vote and we're going to have the government do it. But the government's never held responsible. Neither are the people that vote for it. So you get to vote on things, and this is part of the reason I think a lot of states need to be divided up. You know, the people who actually live in that part of the state should be the ones that are actually ruling their own area. Like if you live in Seattle, for instance, you shouldn't be saying what's going on in the North Atlantic Peninsula. Or I shouldn't, in the North Atlantic Peninsula, shouldn't be telling you what should be going on over there in eastern Washington. In the same way that there's a difference between northern Idaho and southern Idaho. There's a difference between greater Salt Lake area and most of Utah. Just like Chicagoland. Chicagoland is its own thing and the rest of Illinois is fucking insane. What am I getting at with this? These people aren't held responsible for their dumbass voting decisions. And the example of that is the welfare system in America. Like if you're a single individual, no wife, no kids, nobody in school, you're basically paying 35 to 45% of your fucking income in taxes. Let's just go a few more percentage. Half of your labor at that point would basically be given to the government. So how can you say that's not slavery or socialism right there? And they're like, why aren't people working? We don't understand. Why for you don't want to work? Now, like, don't get me wrong. I like driving truck, but I like doing that. But when it comes to a point where you look at the system and you're like, okay, everybody else voting to butt fuck me on a regular basis, and they expect me to just la 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 la, and like hi ho, and you know, like that old joke about the Seven Dwarfs song, I owe, I owe, I owe, so off to work I go to pay taxes for a bunch of schmoes. I owe, I owe, I owe. Like what the fuck? At eventual point where you realize other people's voting patterns done butt fuck people. Now let's bring this back to the spotted owl and the smelt over there in California. A bunch of soft-hearted, easily manipulated, useful idiot liberals are part of the reason where I grew up was a fucking shithole. They voted for that shit. And they talk about the salmon. Save this river, save that river. But then when you say, hey, let's put in some more hatcheries, because anybody who lived in the Northwest knows, if it wasn't for those hatcheries way back in the day, there wouldn't be fish in a lot of the rivers, streams, and water bodies in Western Washington and Oregon. That's just the fucking truth. You don't want to hear that? It's the truth. And yeah, you could say, take out this dam, take out that dam. But what about all the rivers that seem to have salmon issues right now that have no dams on them? Why aren't you focusing on those first? And the answer is because, well, politically, we want the crisis to continue going on. As long as we never really fix the problem, we can keep on using that as an excuse, just like with the spotted owl, the marble murrelet, whatever salmon problem from the Northwest, just like the same fucking problems that I saw growing up all over the goddamn country. You know? And by the way, they come up with a problem. They manufacture a fucking problem, just like with the Delta smelt. And by the way, they've tried to bring back this damn fish over and over again. Mind you, they didn't get rid of the invasive species, the invasive predators that are in the water, and some of the farm runoff as well. They have tried to do this. Now, when that fish they realize it's just functionally extinct, they are just going to switch up to another fish. Make no mistake of that. They will find another reason to keep on flushing your water down the toilet into the great ocean. Now, if you were so damn concerned about this fish all this time, why weren't you building nuclear back? And like, no, nuclear bad, man. If you had the nuclear energy, you could have the desalination plants. Desalination bad, man, because they've actually found you can actually find like rare earth materials from the leftover brine. You understand that? Like we're coming up with solutions to the problems every goddamn day, but every solution is shut down by a bunch of environmental nut jobs. No, man, you can't do it because zero growth, retarded hippies. Mind you, that have grown up in a very prosperous world. These are the same people that still have the 1980s mindset of when I get home, I want to turn the dial on my heat, my cooling to whatever I want, and God forbid where the power comes from because we don't give a shit. As rolling blackouts are unleashed. These people are not held responsible in any which way for the way they vote. You know who is held responsible? And by the way, all these soft-hearted voters are useful fucking idiots. For mega corporations. Y'all don't hear me? Mega corporations. Just like with the ICE protest. Guess what? Who benefits the most from cheap illegal labor? Big corporations. Not your fellow American, not your fellow citizens. Big corporations. And it's crazy when you see some of the people that they're trying to keep from being deported are like fucking, like literally gang members, sex offenders, people with murder raps. Wow, you're really a good person there, Mr. or Mrs. Minnesotan or Californian. You're useful idiots. The megacorps know that sooner or later, if things start improving for the average American citizen because the corporations have to pay slightly more for their labor, guess what'll fucking happen? Yeah, people will look at that trend and go, hey, things are starting to go better. Why don't we get rid of more of the people that weren't supposed to be here to begin with? So useful idiots going, no, man, you can't do that because of whatever reason, are literally pawns for the megacorps. And you want an example of how this works in California? Well, as the farms that planted, like, you understand it takes how many decades to make a good trees for growing almonds and, all sorts of fruits and whatnot. It takes decades to make that orchard or that vineyard. And they go dry. That's kind of like a generational thing that you've pissed away for a fucking 2-inch fish. Who benefits from that? The megacorps. The megacorps will come in there and buy it up. So this is one of the things that a lot of people don't want to acknowledge. Big corporations will complain on the surface about regulations, but they're the biggest pushers for it. They're the biggest funders of it. You know why? Because they can afford to pay it. Just like with the corporations with the trucking industry, where effectively, I think it's something like 70,000 truckers or 80,000 truckers in California that were kind of in that in-between zone. Like they work for other corporations. They have their own trucks, but they work moving freight for some other company. But they're like, well, you have to be an employee now, so they have to pay way more taxes. And they're like, well, fuck it, I can't afford to do business in California. So those people just left. You know who benefited from that? The megacorps. Because now the megacorps can just come in there and basically they can supply it. Who can afford to do all this electrified everything? Yeah, big corporations that have billions of dollars. It kills the mom and pop business. Just like California's obsession about this 2-inch fucking smelt. And by the way, we could have replaced that whole river system with some fish that'll actually thrive there. But God forbid America do something like that. Who really benefits from that? Well, when the farms get sold off to some megacorp, a megacorp. And the politicians and the megacorps are incestuous. They are. But the useful idiots are the ones I can't stand. Because we give you the right to vote without any responsibility. Just like Karens that vote for everyone. We need this BIPOC, blah, blah, blah. And you're like, are you going to live with this situation? No. And just like in the Northwest, like a bunch of assholes from Seattle, the greater Puget Sound, are why the logging industry was collapsed. Probably some DC type of money, some foreigners, some environmental movement nonsense, some leftover deadbeat fucking hippies from the 60s that just never wanted to get a real fucking job. Couldn't produce anything worth a goddamn their whole fucking lives. These people banging their damn drums, acting like they're really changing anything. What the truth is, after all, like, remember all the tree spikers and all that shit, when it was all said and done, they just fucked off back to wherever they lived. Remember Standing Rock? Same shit. Bunch of deadbeat hippies that were totally out of touch with the situation. Because it turned out that the res actually wanted, the Standing Rock people, actually what they wanted is a better piece of the pie, having a pipeline through their area. That quietly got buried really quick. Unlike the garbage that all the fucking hippies left, and if it wasn't for the local state government showing up with like loaders and everything, that would have been an environmental disaster of pollution going into water. Thank God it was still frozen. They managed to get it cleaned up. I think that Standing Rock should stand as the example of why you shouldn't take a lot of protesters seriously. Because at the end of the day, it's more of a fashion trend for these people. It's a fashion trend, and the movement isn't a movement. It's a movement in the way they're just taking a shit somewhere. It's like, for them, it's like, oh God, this is what means something, blah, blah, blah. And then eventually when it gets a little too cold, they're like, let's go to Coachella. That's all a lot of these so-called protest movements are. And the other day when that lady got shot there in Minneapolis, fucking good. I heard the best line for that, Lesbola. These people, these the great unwashed jackasses out there that are basically going and fucking up our country, and all for what? Like, they're not held responsible. And for one brief second, all of them had to take a pause and go, oh shit, if we hit people with cars, we could die. I bet they're not hitting cops with cars as often now. Just like in Florida, right? The protesters got a lot more responsible if they're protesting when it turned out that, yeah, if you try to block the vehicles, yeah, you're going to be arrested. And if you get hit, it's your fucking fault for being a jackass in the road. It's funny, the places that allow the childish, useful idiot behavior are getting worse and worse. And it'd be one thing if you guys had to live in a world that was actually represented. Like, you took a state and you said, okay, here's socialist land. Have fucking fun with that. Let's see if you're trying to escape it like North Koreans trying to get across the land bridge, trying to get across the demilitarized zone or whatever they call it. Basically the no-go zone. But you're never held to that responsibility. And so at the end of the day, you're useful idiots for the Megacorps. Just watch over the years how many farms get bought up by big corporations. And once you start realizing that reality, you're like, oh shit, maybe you should have, it's kind of like that whole joke about the Nazis. They're like sitting there, hey, are we the bad guys? Like, what makes you think us the bad guys? Well, our hats have skulls on them. That's like kind of like the line for a lot of these protesters. At some point, when you look at the results of what you're doing, maybe you should have a self-conscious moment, just like that protest way back in the 60s, the death of the hippie, where they were like, people were realizing it was a totally fake, false, manufactured bunch of bullshit by the music industry. And who was it benefiting? Not the local people. Look up the protest, the death of the hippie. Happened back in San Francisco ages ago. Conscious people realized there was a problem. Everybody else just followed the fucking leader off the cliff. Anyways, I've said my piece on this. Take it easy.